Welcome to the Diverse Minds podcast, where we give you the tips, tools, and techniques you need to be a mentally healthy and inclusive leader. Each week, you'll hear about a variety of topics linked to mental health, well-being, and diversity that will enhance both your professional practice and personal well-being. Welcome to the 291st episode of the award-winning Diverse Minds podcast. And we're coming to the end of, but it is still Black History Month. And don't forget, the podcast is now fortnightly. But if you're missing weekly content, you have 6 years worth of episodes to reflect back on. And you can get them all in my handy guide that lists the episodes with a clickable link at bit.ly/DMPG23. As I mentioned in the last episode, 291, sadly, there's been much less of a corporate buzz around Black History Month, with prominent Black pioneers in the UK not being booked or asked to speak. This is a travesty that needs to be addressed. It also made me reflect on why Black History Month is so important to me as a South Asian person. If you've watched my TEDx talk, you may have looked at the comments underneath, some of which are not great, some of which are very lovely, but I'm going to share with you two that I noticed sort of as soon as they came up. One was, woke victimhood culture, yawn, please do better, TEDx. And another one was, oh, look how Asians take over the Black story and Black Lives Matter. Which then made me think about more things, which is firstly, the history of the word Black with a capital B, why I love Black History Month so much and engage with it year upon year, and how South Asians should and can be allies without being saviors. More about this and other perspectives later in the show. But let's kick off with the history of the term Black with a capital B. And I've used Unison's article defining Black to help me to do this. And I have talked about it in other podcast episodes around South Asian Heritage Month as well. But historically in the UK, the term Black with a capital B has been used routinely for anti-racist campaigns starting in the 1970s, where we saw significant immigration from Uganda, forced migration in essence, and a coalition, and I'm going to use that word very deliberately, of Black, Brown, Southeast Asian, Arab communities. I think Arab communities have definitely grown in the UK, but they've always been present. And 25 years ago, when 4 Black MPs, so they were Bernie Grant, Paul Boateng, Diane Abbott, and Keith Vaz, although he's had a shocking ending to his political career, were elected at the height of the 1980s Black activism. This is where African, Arab, Asian, and Caribbean communities had come together to realize the importance of unity in our common struggle against racism and underrepresentation, and campaigned under the political term Black with a capital B. Now, capitalizing the B signifies that Black is more important than a color. It is an identifier of specific cultural and historical identity shaped by shared experiences of oppression and racism, often founded in occupation and colonization. Although Black History Month is and should be focused on Black, African, and African diaspora, African Caribbean, Black British experiences prior to South Asian Heritage Month being launched, there would also be events that included aspects of Asian, and I mean that in the broadest sense, of culture. Now, my journey with Black History Month in earnest began in 2009 when part of my role as Race, Religion and Belief Projects Officer was tasked with running university-wide Black History Month events. And this was an incredible opportunity. Being South Asian, I guess I would ask the question now, was this wholly appropriate? At the time, maybe. Now I'm not so sure. But one of the things that was very, very crucial and important to me was working with Black staff and local community members from the Black community. And it was interesting because initially I wasn't met with the most open of hearts, but that changed and that definitely shifted. And community members that definitely had my back, and also learning about the subtle and not so subtle differences in racialized experience. That was definitely my learning platform and jumping off point. I was supported and held by key Black women in the community who I want to name, Pat Green and Junie James. And Junie James runs ACI, African Caribbean Heritage Initiative in City of Oxford, as well as Professor Patricia Daly. And there was one community member I remember who came up to me at an event and started really going for me and being very angry. And Pat and Junie got wind of it and they said, if you ever get spoken like that again, you will come and tell us and we will sort it out for you. So it was definitely my rite of passage of learning and living somewhere where global majority citizens were fewer. And there was much more solidarity, I found, actually. And there were very long established communities. So there was a lot of connectivity, but they also felt quite hidden and not as visible as they could and should have been. And I do feel like these days there seems to be a bit of an all or nothing approach of, right, Black people in our organization have to do everything, otherwise it's racist and we don't want to do the quote unquote wrong thing. I think this can really act as a smokescreen and is quite unhelpful. And just this week, I had an example of someone saying, we really want to do something for Black History Month. We've asked for people to be partners with us. No one came forward. So we've not done anything, but that doesn't sit right with me. And so I think that was a really great question. And some other colleagues in the space said, oh, well, you could think about doing this and don't think about just your building, think about other buildings. I'm sure other people would want to reach out for you. And I also said, well, if there aren't people, you could, if you've got some space, if you've got a room, you could advertise it and say, we've got this room for free if anyone wants to use it to host events. You could also give some money or refreshments to a group that needs that or is running an event, and you could sponsor that. I think choosing a book or having a list of books throughout the year from Black authors from around the world and meeting and discussing that. There are always things that you can do that doesn't mean you are usurping or taking advantage of or doing something inappropriate. This is the thing. There's still things that can always be done, and there's so much content online. It could be we're going to watch a recorded talk and come up with our reflections. So from a Black prominent person, and then maybe we're going to put some posts out about our conversation. And again, you're still giving someone the attention, and you tag them in and let them know we've watched your talk. It was brilliant. Everyone should watch it. So these things are actually very simple, but I think they can be quite powerful. I really hope you're enjoying the content of this podcast and want to keep up to date. If you are, then why not join my bi-monthly newsletter? When you join my mailing list, you'll receive my white paper on inclusive language and mental health, and that link is bit.ly/ILMHCK. Okay, so having had this experience of working alongside Black colleagues and community members, I definitely have absorbed the importance of Black History Month, perspectives, stories, and narratives very viscerally in a very visceral way. And I will always do my best to go to events where I can connect with fellow participants and engage, as it's impossible to learn less. And it's a really special time of year when there's so much on offer. I mean, you could just, in any big city actually or small city, you can go to about 100 things. Even in smaller towns and areas, you can go to so much. But not all South Asians are like me, and many South Asian people are disinterested. Now, this will depend on the slice of the South Asian community, and you're very welcome to challenge me on this, listeners. But I do find Gujarati communities, which is my community in theory, very difficult around this area. And in episode 110, I outlined the issues we have in South Asian communities around anti-Blackness. Surprise, surprise, the episode's called Tackling Anti-Blackness in South Asian Communities. And actually, South Asian Heritage Month shared it on their LinkedIn during South Asian Heritage Month this year. So often with many communities not taking the time to understand the legacies of occupation and colonialism, they have left us adhering to a nonsense skin color hierarchy, this belief that we're in the middle and we're better, that we've got culture that other people don't, that, all these misconceptions, I think they can often be worse. But there are two thoughts I have about this. And one is, I haven't actually, interestingly, I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but I haven't experienced fragility when challenging or trying to speak to South Asians about this anti-Blackness or the legacy. Thinking about white fragility, and the definition of that is discomfort and defensiveness on the part of a white person when confronted by information about racial inequality and injustice. As I said, this hasn't happened to me with South Asians. No one's ever started crying. No one's ever started saying, well, I'm a nice person. Why are you confronting me on this? I've had blank stares, shoulders being shrugged, and well, that's just the way the world is attitudes. Just think of our former PM and several South Asian MPs. This is unacceptable. But actually, I have found it easier to deal with than fake tears, because people can withstand it, and it might not sink in and they might not hear it, but I'm not then battling with fake tears. But there is a lot of work to do. And I do feel the more South Asian people we can get to access in terms of their mindset, not in terms of the fact that the events aren't accessible to them, but to access Black history events and Black events led by Black communities around the year and spaces, the better. Because I think that fear and those assumptions and stereotypes start to dissipate. The other point I've reflected on is whether I have acted or been a savior. So you might have heard the term white savior, and it's defined as white saviorism is a critical term for a white person who is depicted as rescuing or helping non-white people, often in developing countries. It implies that the white person's actions are motivated by a belief that they know best and that the local community is incapable of helping themselves, ultimately centering the white individual and disregarding the agency of those they are supposedly helping. This phenomenon is often seen as a modern version of colonialist attitudes and can manifest in charity work, activism, and media. So I wouldn't say I have had the same sorts of systemic advantage and power that white skin brings. I'm not from a Christian colonial background. But were there times where I think I knew best? And that's a question for me to reflect on. I was honored, and can I remember it clearly? That's the other question. But I know that I was very honored to be in a position where I was working alongside key people and offering suggestions. I, for 1 minute, didn't think I knew everything. I mean, I remember it being a steep learning curve. And I also did a very small straw poll on this question of South Asian saviorism with some friends and colleagues and said, oh, actually, could I ask you a question? And they reflected that this was an interesting question. So predominantly, Black women, but they couldn't recall a time where they'd experienced this behavior from South Asian colleagues or people. So that was interesting. I mean, it's a very small straw poll. So perhaps your story is different. If it is, please let me know. Well, I'm not saying this gets me off the hook or any of us. I think it's very useful to be mindful of and aware of the fact that we may slip into this in our roles as well. So it might not come from a colonial perspective or a place where we feel we have more advantage or power, but it might be in my role, I'm really busy and then I have a really busy personal life and I do know it all and I can just do it for you. So even if that's the case, how might it land? Because we know that microaggressions, they may be unintentional, but it's how they land with the recipient. But Black History Month for me is the learning, awareness, and action that can be taken in solidarity and coalition. Now, on the term coalition, I was lucky enough to see Emma Dabiri in conversation, and also a presentation where Dr. Robert Beckford was there. It was an absolutely brilliant event. And her book, What White People Can Do Next, From Allyship to Coalition, published in 2021, Emma Dabiri states, one of the things that allyship fails to address is the fact that you can continue to view Black people as inferior while still being committed to their protection. I think that's very, very interesting, actually. So her perspective is it's about mutuality, that coalition building is concerned with identifying shared interests by focusing on the source of the problem. So here's where we can get to the root of systemic. Dabiri says you can remain mindful of the different textures of our varied but interconnected struggles. And that really is important for me, I think, for if we think about South Asian perspectives, specifically supporting Black stories, Black journeys, Black narratives. It can then shift focus from individual to system. So allyship relies on good behavior of individuals and as such is quite precarious. And I can completely see that. Coalition building shifts the focus to challenge oppressive systems. So again, I talk about systems a lot. We talk about how when you support one group of people, it benefits lots of different people. And then finally, she says it is empowering because allyship appeals to your desire to help a victim. It can actually perpetuate the power imbalance that exists between both of you. On the contrary, coalition building is about identifying a common ground that will benefit all. So hence why I feel so strongly, if we look at those definitions, that definition and the breakdown, that many South Asian and specific South Asian communities can do a lot more. And engaging in Black History Month and opening your eyes can be a start. It's always a start or, a continuation of the journey. Anyone has the potential to organize and oversee corporate Black History Month events alongside key partners from Black communities. There are lots of ways you can do this. And this could be giving space, money, time, and starting small. And check out episode 113, Ensuring a Black History Month 365 approach, as October isn't your only chance. There are different ways to do things and consider fragility and saviorism in the process, no matter what your racial background, particularly, in the context of Black History Month, as being from non-Black communities. For global majority communities who don't identify as Black, consider this racial hierarchy and nonsense and where it comes from, how and why it does not serve us, particularly on a systemic level, as well as an individual level. And coalition is essential if we are to amplify the voices of Black communities and their stories. And a 365 approach is vital for changing systems and keeping momentum going. And remember, creating these environments is not only beneficial for individual employees, but also boosts morale, engagement, and retention across the organization. If you're looking to foster a positive wellbeing culture and would like guidance on creating strategies tailored to your team's needs, then of course Diverse Minds is here to help you. So do reach out to me about training, consultancy, coaching services to design a healthy, equal, resilient workplace. You can email me at Layla, Leyla, at diverseminds.co.uk. And I really hope you've enjoyed today's show and shows over the last 6 years. And if you have, leave me a review on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from. And if you haven't watched that TEDx talk that I mentioned at the beginning, see what you think about it. That link is bit.ly/TEDx Wolves, WOLVESLO. It's just 12 minutes long and it's all about the connection between culture, race and mental health. And I hope you've had a brilliant Black History Month. Remember, there's still some left. Keep going, keep sharing your ideas, keep amplifying the voices, and I will catch you on the next episode. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Diverse Minds podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you access your podcasts from. You can also connect with me on Facebook and LinkedIn. Tune into next week's episode of the podcast, where I'll bring you more insights on mental health and inclusion. Bye for now.